and welcome to this episode of Trader Talk TV. My name is Lindsay Roundtree, and I'm delighted to be joined today by Simon Halstead, who is VP of Exchange and Supply International at Yahoo. Hello, Simon.
Hi, Lindsay. How are you doing?
I'm very well. How are you?
I'm very good. Excited to be here to talk about lots of stuff to do with the future of cookies.
Well, absolutely, as everyone's talking about at the moment. So specifically today, we're talking about next generation audiences and context, and the role that context plays in what the future audience looks like. And one, I guess, in terms of setting the scene as to kind of what the current situation is. Actually, we heard just today that Axel Springer and many other German publishers are trying to sue Google, get the EU involved in and complain to Margaret Vestager about the fact that what Google are doing in terms of deprecating third-party cookies is illegal. In that, Google can still see all the data that publishers can't. So I guess it's probably a good story to kind of kick off the current situation with. So kind of what are your views on that, and how does that impact kind of what the work that everyone's doing and the work that Yahoo are doing?
Look, I mean, I think it's super interesting, right? I think we all should accept that the cookie is going, right? It's happening end of 2023. It shows how complicated it is and how there aren't simple solutions and how people are feeling impacted by it. We see the input from people like the ICO about what they think might be valid solutions moving forward. But I think as an industry, we need to move forward. And so, yes, there's what's the cookie and what's being lost and what's replaceable. But it's also about, okay, how do we address audiences moving forward? What's the right way? What's the right way to address audiences, and how can we approach that? And we've got some views about how we think the whole web will shape up, and then where we think there are specific opportunities around contextual and how contextual can lead to some audience-like groupings and behaviors that we'd love to talk about today.
Brilliant. So let's get into it, and let's kind of, I guess, go into the scene setting. Kind of in your view, what does the web look like at the moment?
So I'm just going to try and bring up a screen. I'm using a Jamboard for the first time, so it's very exciting. So hopefully this works well. So look, from our point, we think the web is going to address into lots of different parts, and parts of different sizes. So we view this as a pyramid, and really at the top of the pyramid, there are going to be ad opportunities with identity. Okay, they're going to be in probably the smallest grouping, first-party logged-in users, where users have given consent, have logged in, and that creates the opportunity for them to be addressable, where they, as I say, where they've consented. There's also going to be first-party non-logged-in audiences. So that's where the publisher still understands and knows the data still has a first-party cookie, can still address that user, but there isn't logged in and maybe not more additional information to support that identity. And then we think there are other opportunities in the cohorts, and we've heard a lot about cohorts with a variety of bird acronyms, and there's still a lot of debate about what the path forward is there. And modeled audiences, where people are building their understanding of an audience, which is an ad opportunity without identity. There's no specific identifier in place, but still ways to address audiences from signals. And then there's non-audience based contextual targeting. And I think even contextual is more complex than it used to be, rather than being just one thing.
And so today, sorry, what were you going to say?
No, I was saying, does that make sense? I think that's how we see the market to break.
I mean, that makes perfect sense. And I guess that, what this pyramid makes it very, very clear is that the top part is a dwindling audience size. And so actually, while there's obviously opportunity for advertisers to go after that audience, there is much more opportunity to go after the bottom of the pyramid, if you like, where there is much more scale available. But I guess it's the challenges they're facing is how they go about that and what that actually looks like. And when you look at cohorts and model audiences versus contextual, it does feel like, while there's a lot of talk about contextual, it feels like there's a lot of misunderstanding about what that could do, and everyone seems to be scrambling after the same first-party logged-in minute audience in comparison to what could be available. Is that fair, or are you still seeing audience advertiser struggles here?
I mean, I think there are challenges across the piece. I think that there will be a good audience of first-party logged-in data, but it's hard to necessarily create login behavior where you don't already have that as a publisher, right? And there's a value exchange you have to understand and work on there. But it will definitely be smaller. That's the thing that's in no doubt. And again, we already operate in Safari in a in a non-cookied environment. So we're used to that in some cases. I think the thing with contextual being many different things and model audiences being different things is because we're early in the process, not everything is yet known. We don't know exactly how the industry will play out. We don't know where people will coalesce around. The interesting thing about the cohorts approach that existed was that was very much decided by the browser. The browser would put you in a cohort, certainly initially with the initial flock test, and it would define that audience that it grouped you as part of. And then it might change it, but you didn't necessarily know. So that had some use and had some good privacy elements to it. But it's very different to someone being able to build or model their own audience based on their own knowledge and build that contextual solution. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to click onto my next Jamboard slide. And by the way, I'm only using slides here, guys, because my drawing is so bad. That I thought it would help us all. But I thought it'd be interesting to talk about what is a next gen audience or a next gen contextual opportunity. So when you start, there's publisher context on page. I go and visit. I'm a cricket fan. I'm a running fan. Well, sorry, I'm a runner. I'm not a running fan. I'm just a runner.
No one's a running fan, I don't think. I'm certainly not a running fan.
Watch lots of news, watch a fair bit of TV. So there's lots of different me's and lots of different contexts, right? And so the publisher knows me in the context when I'm on that page. It can assign me into a contextual group. I can be targeted based on the fact that I'm looking at cricket. And even with cricket, you can do some assumed or modeled basis that someone who likes cricket will be of a certain age and demographic, and therefore you could start to apply some of those audiences to it. We think there's an opportunity where you actually take additional information, so publishers' first-party data, in our case, Yahoo proprietary data, and are able to merge those two data together to create a training set. And that allows us to look at, okay, what do we see across this publisher? What do we see from our knowledge of a Yahoo consumer? And then how can we address that with other signals, with new signals to build out the contextual environment to create this inference of an audience. And so we'll look at some new real-time signals like content or weather or geo or time of day. It can even be one of those. And those two things together give us this sort of model persona of what audiences look like. But then what happens, and this is why it's important from a cookieless perspective, when a cookieless impression occurs, we're able to take those signals that we have and use that knowledge that we've gained, combining our first party and the publisher's first party data to create a really good approximation of what that audience may be like, of how that audience may behave. And actually, we've seen really good results where we've been working with this already. We see pretty good trialing of this. And it means it's done live, but I do want to stress the point, it's also done on the impression without there being identity. It's not being tied back to an individual user. There's a training set of data so that we build and understand of the patterns we would like to see, but we're not actually identifying the user at that point. We're just seeing the patterns emerge to match that pattern to give us the sense of the audience. So we think that's really exciting from a next gen perspective. We think publishers will be able to do this at some degree. We also think being able to do this at scale with multiple publishers is a really interesting opportunity for us. So for advertisers, it gives more scale. It gives scale in that bottom part where there isn't an identity. We're able to make some, in effect, assumptions about identity that we believe will be accurate. For the consumer, it's still beneficial. There's still beneficial ad experiences. They're still not seeing, or they're still receiving a level of targeted advertising, but it's non-specific to their data. And for publishers, it's a way to monetize that impression that doesn't have identity on a much stronger basis. And that's definitely what we're seeing. That's definitely what we're seeing in the wild. And then I'm going to just click on one more slide to talk a little bit more about how some of the actual pieces work together.
Great.
So what we're seeing is this is how it happens in the moment, if that makes sense, right? The user visits a page and that creates a page impression. That gives us some information. There are some real-time signals that come through. So we get some raw signals, be those zip code, device, page URL. Page URL is obviously critical for the context part of this audience and building from those audiences. We're then able to enrich that. Apologies for my reminders popping up. I thought I'd stop them all.
I thought it was mine.
That was mine. We're then able to enrich that data, right, using additional data. So postal code or zip code or some device info where that's passed. The depth of the page information, maybe it's just a high level content category, maybe it's some more specific information. And building those two together, first of all, we get just richer contextual segments. So there's a pure contextual play, but also we get these then real-time proxy for audiences that we think and we believe and we have seen start to be really effective. And we're seeing these techniques used already on Safari impressions, and we're seeing those generate enhanced returns against, for a publisher perspective, significantly enhanced monetization and great advertiser performance. Again, we're seeing advertiser performance that's comparable or better to similar targeting used via a cookie basis. So I think I've talked a lot. I've talked quite quick as well, so I'll just slow it down and say, I think one of the things is really important here is how contextual and next generation contextual audiences can play part of the solution alongside that absolutely logged in verified user data. But actually, I think for advertisers, they're going to need to adjust techniques and look at lots of different ways to reach their audiences. And the same for publishers. Publishers are going to need to understand how to build their audiences together, understand who to partner with, who can help them enhance and enrich that data and take it forward.
And so that's really interesting. It's great to see it from a perspective of this is actually take some real-time signals, and this is the audience you can come out with. It helps to visualize that, and I think especially for advertisers to understand how much they can get from some real-time data signals and a bit of machine learning, and which is what comes out of it, because it does feel like this is obviously a win for consumers, because consumers will be able to see some targeted but not scarily targeted advertising. Publishers, context has been important to publishers for a long time, and this is a great way for them to be able to monetize their inventory more effectively and increase their yield. And for advertisers too, it enables them to achieve scale, right? But I remember back to many years ago when I was watching Yahoo present about probabilistic versus deterministic. And it makes me think of the conversations back then. Probabilistic means you probably, this probably is this person. Deterministic means this probably definitely is this person. And at the time, advertisers were saying, we don't want to probably know, we don't want assumptions, we want to definitely know. Is that mindset changing? Because this conversation here and looking at kind of, this is the kind of audience you can get, and it's actually really rich, it's really insightful and really powerful, the kind of targeting and advertising you can do with this amount of data without actually knowing who the person is. Does the advertisers still want that? Are they not still striving for that deterministic modeling that tells them exactly who the person is? And if so, how do we get them interested and engaged in this kind of concept?
So long question with a couple of parts in it. I think
it was a very long question, for which I apologize.
Because it's long and complicated, and these questions do intermingle a lot of the time. I'm going to break it down a couple of different ways. First of all, just from an output basis, we see these solutions working as well as pure deterministic data, right? Purely signaled intended data. That's not always accurate. Actually, because of the nature of how we gain login data, have pretty accurate data, but still people can choose the data fields they put in. So we actually have great parity between the types of data, sometimes outperformance this way as well. The reason advertisers want non-modeled because they want absolute data is because for years that's what we all told them that was available, and so there are and was the best. And there are two things that are going to happen. One is there's going to be less of that data available, right? Of that deterministic logged in data. That will have an increased value. That will drive up the cost of using that data. And I think there's then a reward for people about where is the right price point for my performance to find that data, to find those users, and to deliver the scale I need for my campaigns, as well as that data has shrunk. So yeah, we see a lot of lean in from advertisers. We see a lot of lean in from publishers as well to understand their audience. And I'd say in the majority, we're definitely seeing those that are starting to experiment and adopt now get further ahead on the curve. And that's really what I'd encourage everybody to do, is to experiment with first-party data or traditional audiences, to experiment with buying data direct, but also to experiment with some of these newer techniques and newer product solutions that are out there. The other thing is nothing stays still, right? So this will evolve. Like even as we look at this page and we talk about the inputs used for data, Some of those may change, right? There may be, some of that data may be truncated, or there may be decisions used about how that data can be used, even in a seed sense, right? Or even if it's passed. So I think the industry will continue to evolve. I do think also we need to talk better about the value of context or derived audiences that can be found, because most of TV buying is off a derived audience, right? It's off a panel. It's not off an actual audience, it's a derived audience, an assumed audience. And panels themselves may be part of the solution to audience targeting as well. But really, this is sort of a super panelized approach where you're using real data to inform. That's giving you the data, the basis you need, where you can then apply computational machine learning power that can get you that accuracy at scale and quick enough to make that work in real time. So I think there's a lot of positive in there, and I just encourage people to try and to learn. And you know, as we spoke about with legal challenges with constant guidance, we're going to have to see which and how of the solutions are acceptable or continue to work out on a logged in basis, on a hashed email basis, whether or not the Axel Springer case has some legs and that has an impact. Obviously, Google are very tied into their own process with the CMA about how they announce changes going forward as well. So we're all watching and learning together. There is a lot of activity that's going on at industry bodies at a much higher level. I think IAB have been out this week talking about how they're going to engage in some of these conversations with regulators as well. So nothing is definite for now. There are good solutions out there, and I'd encourage people to test and learn so they're able to adapt to the future. The worst thing being trying to adapt at the moment of change, right? Where you haven't had the chance to learn and experiment.
Yeah, I mean, that's great advice, isn't it? Don't wait until the last minute. If you've got the opportunity to start now. And I think that, you know, whatever happens with the Axel Springer and Google lawsuit, it doesn't ultimately matter. As you said at the very beginning, you know, cookies are going away, and even if they aren't, we need to wean ourselves off them anyway, because they're not the best solution. Just because we've been using them for so long doesn't mean that they're the best way of being able to target a user.
Yeah, I mean, absolutely, right. And I think the trend around cookies, but the trend around consumer data is changing. The trend around regulation is changing, and I think it's really important everyone leans into that and tries to work together as an industry to find those solutions that will work and give scale, that work in different sort of contexts and environment, from high logged in penetration audiences to low logged in penetration audiences to no login. There are some publishers out there that login is very challenging to get. That's not the nature of how people visit their site. So a range of solutions and a range of ways for people to make money, I think, is critical going forward.
Definitely. And I'm also interested in how, from a publisher and an advertiser perspective, context and this next generation of audience creation, if you like, actually helps them, helps the funnel, helps them work together, helps, I guess, measurement as well. I mean, are there certain types of, obviously the publishers that are going to be most interested in this are the ones, as you say, that haven't got a wealth of logged in data. That isn't how they operate their business. From an advertiser perspective, are you seeing a certain type of advertiser that's leaning into this more than others? And is it those that have a different approach to measurement? Is it those that aren't looking at the kind of top of funnel measurements, but are looking more at an outcomes basis that understand this more? Or are there lots of different types of advertisers going after this?
It's both broader and not very broad yet. So there isn't a clear, distinct type of person who's stepping in and learning contextual, either from the publisher or the buy side. And let's be clear, it's not learning contextual. Contextual's been used for a very long time.
Absolutely.
Right?
Almost
and it is a valid tactic that's used a lot. It's the one we don't talk about, but it drives a lot of already existing prospecting and other behavior. And, you know, it's a fairly basic standard of media planning anyway. So it's a little bit early to really say we see that this type of advertiser or this person is doing better, or this type of publisher is doing better, because we're seeing a spectrum, that's the word I was looking for earlier, a spectrum of consumers on both sides use these technologies and get good results from them. So as I say, it's probably a bit early.
Right, excellent. And I guess the final question I've got for you is, what What's next from how you are working with publishers, working with advertisers to really start driving this forwards, and the conversations you're having with them? How do you see the next kind of 6 to 12 months play out in the contextual space and the generation of next gen audiences?
I think that there's a couple of different conversations. One with advertisers, and I'd make that bifurcation. I think with advertisers, it's just talking about what are your goals going to be? How do you want to address audiences? How do you target? And talking them through solutions like this, and talking them through what's going to be addressable via direct identity, where they're going to need into this more modeled identity or next gen contextual type space. From the publisher perspective, I think it's very early days. I think publishers right now are spending a lot of time looking at how they generate revenue full stop from advertising, from subscription and other services. All of those things, how they can drive their own login, but driving login is not simple. So that's just an ongoing conversation. And I think people are testing more solutions. So I think, there are, I think we spoke previously about, or it might have been in the prediction piece I did, publishers will sell audience contextual PMPs still really successfully and are still doing that. So it's where even these techniques fit into their own monetization efforts, and where they want it to be at a more aggregated scale than just what they can do on their own site. But as I say, I think also a lot of people are still surviving on, this week's news, this week's cookie, this week's opportunity, and are starting to put the bedrocks in place to be able to understand. Particularly on publishers, there's a little bit about understanding their own audiences themselves, which a lot are doing a lot more work to be able to prepare for this future.
That makes perfect sense, and we will link to the predictions piece you just referred to in the body of the article, because yes, you did mention it in there, and that's a very, very good point. We are out of time, but I want to say thank you very much for joining me, Simon.
Thanks, Lindsay. Always a pleasure to speak to you.
Likewise, and this has been Trader Talk TV. We'll see you next time.